Before the superheroes, there was a man who was ready to quit. He was tired, frustrated, convinced that the work he poured his imagination into would never be taken seriously. He had spent decades writing stories that disappeared as quickly as they were printed, creating characters owned by others, chasing deadlines instead of dreams. And then, almost by accident, he decided to break the rules. He wrote heroes who failed, heroes who doubted themselves, heroes who argued, worried about money, lost their tempers, and made mistakes. He gave them powers, yes, but he also gave them anxiety, guilt, and responsibility. That choice would change pop culture forever. His name was Stan Lee, and for much of his life, success came late, but when it came, it reshaped the modern myth. Stan Lee was born Stanley Martin Lieber on December 28, 1922 in New York City to Romanian Jewish immigrants struggling to survive the Great Depression. His father worked intermittently as a dress cutter, often unemployed. Money was tight, space was tighter, and young Stanley learned early how powerful imagination could be when reality felt limiting. He devoured books, pulp magazines, and movies. Stories were escape, but also aspiration. At just 17 years old, Stanley landed a job at Timely Comics, a small publishing company that would later become Marvel. His position was humble, refilling inkwells, proofreading pages, erasing pencil lines, but he was inside the world he wanted to be part of. In 1941, he got his first writing credit in Captain America Comics #3 under the name Stan Lee, a pen name he adopted because he dreamed of writing the great American novel one day and wanted to save his real name for it. The dream would have to wait. World War II interrupted his early career. Lee served in the U.S. Army, not as a frontline soldier, but as a writer, creating training manuals, slogans, and educational films. The Army classified him as a playwright, a title shared by only a handful of people. When the war ended, Lee returned to comics, but the industry was changing. Superheroes fell out of fashion. Lee wrote whatever sold: westerns, romance, monster stories, humor. It paid the bills, but it drained him creatively. By the late 1950s, Stan Lee was close to quitting. He felt trapped, stuck producing formulaic stories for a medium few respected. Comics were considered disposable, childish, and artistically empty. Lee was in his late 30s and deeply dissatisfied. Then a conversation with his wife Joan changed everything. She told him something simple: if he was going to quit anyway, he might as well write the kind of stories he wanted to write. So he did. In 1961, Stan Lee and artist Jack Kirby created the Fantastic Four, a superhero team unlike anything before it. They argued, they failed, they were a family, not just a group of crime fighters. The comic was a success, and suddenly everything changed. What followed was one of the most explosive creative runs in entertainment history. Alongside artists like Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko, Lee helped bring to life Spider-Man, the Hulk, Iron Man, Thor, Doctor Strange, the X-Men, Daredevil, and Black Panther. These characters weren't perfect. Peter Parker worried about rent, Tony Stark battled addiction, the X-Men faced prejudice and fear. Their struggles mirrored real human problems, and readers recognized themselves in the masks. Stan Lee didn't just write superheroes, he humanized them. He also revolutionized how comics spoke to their audience. Through his editor's columns, playful footnotes, and self-aware humor, Lee created a sense of community. Readers weren't just consumers, they were part of a shared universe. Marvel wasn't just publishing stories, it was building a relationship. By the late 1960s, Marvel Comics became a cultural force. College students read them, critics took notice. Lee became the public face of the company, charismatic, energetic, endlessly enthusiastic. But behind the scenes, tensions grew. Questions of credit and compensation haunted Marvel's success. Artists like Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko felt under-recognized. The truth is complex. Lee was a writer, editor, promoter, and collaborator, but Marvel's creative process was messy, fast-moving, and often poorly documented. Lee would become both celebrated and criticized for his role. In the 1970s, Lee moved to California, aiming to bring Marvel characters to film and television. For decades, success was limited.
Low-budget adaptations came and went. Hollywood didn't yet know what to do with superheroes. And then, long after many had written him off again, the world caught up. The early 2000s changed everything. X-Men, Spider-Man, Iron Man, and eventually the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Characters born on cheap paper were now global icons. Stan Lee, now elderly, became something new, a living legend. His cameos became traditions. His phrases "Excelsior" and "True Believers" became cultural shorthand. He wasn't just a creator, he was the symbol of imagination rewarded by persistence. But his final years were complicated. After Joan Lee's death in 2017, Stan's health declined. Allegations of financial exploitation and mistreatment surfaced. Court battles followed. The image of the joyful showman was replaced briefly by concern and controversy. It was a difficult ending for a man whose life had already been full of reinvention. Stan Lee died at the age of 95. The tributes poured in from around the world, not just from actors or executives, but from readers, people who had found courage in flawed heroes, people who felt seen in stories once dismissed as childish. Stan Lee never wrote the great American novel, but he did something else. He helped create modern mythology. He proved that stories about power could also be stories about responsibility, that fantasy could reflect reality, and that it's never too late, never, to make the thing you actually believe in. Stan Lee once said, "I used to be embarrassed because I was just a comic book writer while other people were building bridges or going on to medical careers. And then I began to realize entertainment is one of the most important things in people's lives." He was right, because long after the last page is turned, the best stories don't just distract us, they remind us who we are and who we might become.